Alright, what's going on, guys? This is Taryn. I am here to bring you my 7.1 guide. This is not 7.1.5. This is being recorded as of December 5th. If 7.1.5 has come out after you watching this is probably out of date. But a lot of the fundamentals aren't changing, maybe. We can hope that they will change. But, needless to say, I'm here to talk to you about the Affliction Warlock. This is a really fascinating spec. It seems like there is only the drain and dot, but there is a little more to it. We're going to kind of talk to you guys about that a little bit. So we're going to go over just our basic spells first. I'm going to come over here. So these 5 right here, these are the gist of what you're going to be doing. You have Corruption, deals damage over time. That's about it. Agony will ramp up very slowly. It has 10 stacks. Every time it deals damage or you apply Corruption, it adds a stack of Corruption, so you can see that right here. We're at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so that's pretty quick and easy to note. And yeah, so it has a chance, as you can see here, to generate a Soul Shard, and that's pretty much the gist of it. It deals very good damage once it hits 10 stacks. So Unstable Affliction, this has been changed. This is now your shard dump. It deals its damage over 8 seconds. Unstable Affliction has only 4 ticks. Its haste is reduced, or its haste will reduce the damage, the duration of the dot, and make it tick faster. So you can think of what the Archimon trinket did if you had that back in the day. So it just shortens the period. That's all it does. You don't get extra ticks from haste. This doesn't mean haste is bad. We'll get into that a little bit. As far as single target, you also have Drain Life. This is just your standard filler. It deals damage and heals you for that damage. That healing is increased drastically as you get more. You get a couple of things with the artifact. And then for AoE, you have Seated Corruption. Seated Corruption deals damage. It will explode after you deal damage to it. You can see here. And then it applies Corruption to all targets that are hit by Seed. So, it's pretty good, pretty cut and dry. We'll go over talents here. You have, for the tier 15, you have, I mean, all these you have obviously have 3 choices. Some of them you have less choice than others. So, you have Drain Soul. This upgrades your Drain Life to the Drain Soul. You get a chance. You get the shard generation effect back from Drain Life, and it deals more damage than Drain Life does. It deals almost twice as much damage. So good things there. One thing to note is it heals for approximately the same amount. So if your Drain Life healed you for 500k a tick, Drain Soul would also heal you for approximately 500k, 500, whatever I said, 50 or 500k, I don't remember. But Writhen Agony, your Agony will ramp up twice as high. So you have it can stack up to 20 instead of 10. It deals more damage, really good for multi-target. Haunt is now a single target nuke that its cooldown is refreshed when the target dies. This talent is not ever really used right now, so it's just something to note. Tier 30, you have 3 talents here. Contagion, while your Unstable Affliction is on a target, that target takes 12% bonus damage. Really good. That Contagion applies to the whole UA that it's stacked with, so that's good. Absolute Corruption makes your Corruption permanent on the targets, 40% against players, and deals bonus damage, which is good. Mana Tap, this talent drains mana and increases all of your damage by 10% for 20 seconds. This is good. It theoretically sims higher than the other 2. However, it is a pain in the ass to maintain, and it reduces your survivability, so there's some disbenefits there to it. Level 45, you have Demonic Circle, which is exactly like it was before. There's a macro that I will link in the description below that will help you use it a little more like what it was. So I will link that in the description of this video. Mortal Coil is exactly what it used to do. Heals you if it deals... It hits a target with a Horrify. If it fears the target, you will deal damage and you will get healed for it. But there are very few instances where this actually does anything, so it's not really worth it. Howl of Terror, exactly like it's been since forever, really. But again, this has very little use in just about anything. So you go into level 60, you have Soul Harvest here. This increases your damage done for 10 seconds base, and for every agony that you have out, it increases by 2 seconds. Generally not used because it just doesn't provide as much damage as what you can get from other things. Otherwise, this is really just a 2-minute cooldown, but it just doesn't last long enough to be worth it. So the seeds, this makes your Seed of Corruption hit multiple targets. So not like the explosions, but you will actually seed up to 5 targets in one cast, which makes Seed of Corruption actually deal AoE damage. Siphon Life. This is just like old Siphon Life from Burning Crusade. It deals damage and heals you for 100% of the damage that it deals. Awesome. Level 75, this is a bunch of defensives, and yes, Burning Rush is a defensive. I'll explain why in a minute. Demonic Skin, you have a passive now called Soul Leech. Soul Leech heals you, puts a shield on you for damage that you, up to 30% of the damage that you deal, for up to 20% of your maximum health. Demonic Skin, or sorry, it's up to 15% of your maximum health, sorry. And Demonic Skin raises that to 20%, and that shield will just passively generate by 1%, no matter what happens. So that just applies on top of everything. So if you're not able to deal damage, or you just enter the fight with a 20% shield, which is good. Burning Rush increases your movement speed by up to 50%. It does deal damage, but your movement impairing effects may no longer reduce you below 100% of normal movement speed. So there are fights like Cenarius, where the sisters will hit you with that dot, or with that bladed explosion thing, and this allows you to move at normal movement speed, which is really good. The last thing is Dark Pact, which will hit you with a shield for a lot. We'll just drop down to almost no hit points so you can get an idea. So we're at about 60k, and that shields us for, it's about a third of your health is what it ends up being, so it's pretty good. Just as a little demo there. And then for 90, this is your Grimoire tree. This has to deal with your pets. Grimoire Supremacy allows you to summon your Doomguard or Infernal as a permanent pet. The Doomguard and Infernal deal a lot of damage. This is generally your go-to talent for most things, just because the Doomguard deals so much damage. It allows you to hot swap between single target and AoE as you need, and it allows you to hop swap between an interrupt and a stun in things like Mythic Plus, which is really important. Grimoire of Service. This allows you to summon a bonus demon that deals bonus damage, and it will use one of its main abilities on immediately when you summon it. So your go-to with this is generally your Fell Hunter. The Fell Hunter deals bonus damage it has its little Shadow Bite that deals damage and is increased for each damage over time effect that you have. It's nifty. It's not a major damage source though. In fact, Supremacy actually is more damage than Service. So the last one is Grimoire of Sacrifice, which your shadow damage has a chance to deal like a little explosion of shadow damage. This is not useful anymore. Part of the problem, number one, is to remove your Command Demon ability. As of recording this, you do not get your Command Demon ability anymore with this. You don't get a lot of things that are really important. So this is generally never picked. Normally it's just flat out Supremacy. So your last one, and this is kind of, we'll get to the last talent, we'll get to the saltiest talent last. You have Soul Conduit. Soul Conduit gives you, every time you use a soul shard, you have a chance to refund that shard. So that's pretty good. There's very little use for this. The math is this is not the talent you want to get unless you can have up to 4 targets continually with Agony. So just something to know. Phantom Singularity deals a pretty big burst of damage. To compare, it is about 1.5 unstable afflictions, or 1 3/4, almost 2 unstable afflictions over 15 seconds, and it deals that AoE. within 25 yards, and then it heals you for all damage, or for 30% of the damage that it deals. So it's really good for AoE. I like this talent a lot for low-end Mythic Pluses, just because it gives you a lot of burst and stuff. And then lastly is Soul Effigy. Soul Effigy is a band-aid for how bad our shard generation is on single target. This gives us 35. Gives us another target that we can dot. It is latched onto one target, and 35% of all damage done to that effigy is transferred into the target that you're dealing that it's latched to, and it counts as a second target for shard generation and everything. So, really good. As far as talent builds, I tend to have really two that I run. I run something along this lines for anything that's low end Mythic Plus or just Heroics or anything. This gives you the most amount of AoE burst. This also gives you relatively decent single target burst. This is the best burst for single target, but it is not nearly as good as for just the raw AoE that you need. Mythic Plus is, frankly, the hardest part about Mythic Plus is the trash. It's not the boss until you hit 10 with the fortified buff. So, this is kind of what you want to go to with anything involving low end 5-man content, or just kind of trolling around in like your LFRs or something. This is also fun. And then as far as pure single target, your general go-to build, this tier, and this tier is obviously irrelevant for damage. This is just more, these two talents just kind of lend down to personal preference. But as far as pure single target, these three talents are relatively close. These two are within about 0.25% of each other. Mana Tap does technically sim higher, but it is a lot more of a pain in the ass to use, and it drastically reduces your survivability compared to Contagion or AC, especially AC. The differences between these two are about 1 to 2%, but Absolute Corruption gives you a higher drain life uptime, which is higher survivability, which, if you're learning a fight and stuff like that, is good. If you ever have more than 2 targets that you'll continuously have to dot throughout a large portion of the fight, so Odin would be a good example of this. AC tends to lean itself to be better. There's also lots of tomfoolery you can do with putting AC on it, putting your corruption on all the little ads that come out. So I tend to prefer AC, partially out of laziness, partially just because the difference is not that much. So this kind of comes down to personal preference, but everything else, Writhe and Agony, absolute must for pure single target damage. Agony will become your highest damage dealing dot unless you're running a bunch of really silly legendaries. Excuse me. Siphon Life is another dot that you can deal. It ends up being about 12% of your base damage. So, and then Soul Effigy is again about 10 to 12% of your base damage, and it is a bonus to shard generation. Shard generation, we'll touch on that for a brief minute. Shard generation is not linear. What that means is for every target that you add an Agony on, that your shard generation is not linearly better. Your second target is only about a 33% increase on your shard generation. The third target is only 20%, and the fourth target is about 15%, and it kind of tailors off from there. It stays relatively above 10% bonus, but it doesn't go any higher than really 15 after that point. This is it's a square root function if you've done your algebra and stuff, and it just kind of tapers off after that point. So what that means is your Soul Effigy is 35% of all the damage on it you transfer, and then you get about 33% bonus shard generation, which is way better than Soul Conduit. So good things to note there. Yeah, so outside of that, this is just the general talent build, and let's talk about your artifact. So Oltesh, the Deadwind Harvester, this is essentially a band-aid for how bad dot classes generally are at ads. short-lived ads, we are typically very bad at it. So what this has done is it said, okay, that's fine. We're going to leave everything else alone. We're going to try and improve the thing that you are genuinely bad at. There's a couple things else that we're bad at. We'll get to that in the strengths and weaknesses here in a minute, but we'll talk about this. So this revolves around a talent or a trait called Reap Souls. So periodically, when you deal damage, there's going to be little purple dots that appear on your screen. Those are tormented souls. You can consume those tormented souls with your Reap Soul button, and it causes you to get a damage buff for 5 seconds per soul consumed. So if you have 6 souls out, you get 30 seconds of damage boost. That's 10% bonus damage, and all traits that you have are amplified. Now, if you have, like me, I have 5 of 5 because I have 2 relics, and this Hideous Corruption, which increases my corruption by 20%, that actually becomes 40% when this Reap is active. So it's really extremely powerful. The other thing is this will proc off of mobs. You will get an additional soul from certain mobs that die. You don't have to get the killing blow or anything. This is very limited in raids. It's everywhere in 5-mans. Your mythic pluses, anything that dies, that is another soul. You can have very frequently. You can have about a 90% uptime on this buff in your mythic plus, but in raids it is very limited as to who gives this buff. Right now, the only things I have seen that give it are the spiders on Renfarrell, the wisps on Cenarius, and then the little creeper ads that come out in phase 2. Or phase 3, I guess, of Habeas. So it's very limited in that. I haven't really gone through and figured out who is giving them in Nighthold. It's something on my to-do list, but that's to note. So talk about the golden traits. First one is the one that everyone knows is single target damage. Every time your corruption deals damage, it has a 50% chance to deal bonus shadow damage and heal you for 100% of the damage dealt. That's just a flat out. It ends up being about a 3 to 4% damage bonus depending on your Reap uptime. So, good stuff there. Soul Flame. And these are the two that people get confused about, and we'll explain this. Soul Flame. Whenever you kill a target, you deal you deal a percent of your spell damage to the target, or to all targets around you. It ends up being about 150% of your spell damage. So I'm in 884 gear. It's about 35k spell damage. So about 150, 160%. 180 maybe. But deals shadow damage. The reason why this is awesome is, again, mythic pluses and a lot of other fights where you get ads. You can group these ads around a boss. You don't have to get the killing blow. You have to have threat on them in some way. Just a single dot is fine. As long as you are on their threat table in some way from something you've dealt to them, you will get this bonus, or you will be eligible for these, and when they explode, they deal a lot of damage. It's really awesome. The only fight that I know for sure doesn't do that is in Nighthold. When that does come out, apparently the Scorpions are not eligible for Soul Flame anymore. So, unfortunate, but not surprised, because that was silly. The last thing that we get is a thing called Wrath of Consumption. Every time that a target is eligible for Soul Flame, I assume it's going to be, if it's just eligible for Soul Flame, I'll have to test the Scorpion boss, or check some logs for it at least. Every time that one of those targets dies, you get a 2% damage bonus for the next 20 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. This goes up to 10%. This is also amplified by Reap. Everything that I have seen, at least. So this is really powerful. This talent right here is where, or talent trait, this is where the real power of Affliction comes in right now. So there are quite a few fights where you can have a 5 stack of this up for 30, 45, a good 30 to 40% of the fight and deal massive damage. So other important traits, you have Fatal Echoes. Every time the UA expires, it has a 6% chance to reapply itself. This is damage you do not count on. You do not count on this because it happens when you least expect it. You can unload 5 to 6 UA into the target, just chain them one after the other, and this won't proc. And then you'll be trying to maintain contagion, your contagion debuff on the target, and you'll hit that UA right as that first one was going to expire, and then you have 2 of them ticking at once. It's really annoying. Oh, I forgot to mention, Unstable Affliction. This dot, you can have multiple UAs. I don't think you can see it. Well, I think you'll be able to see it if I have this. This is my focus target here, and you can have multiple UAs on a target. So just something to note. These are all treated as separate buffs. They do not amplify contagion. Only one contagion is affected, and there you see that was the Fatal Echoes proc right there. So, anyways. Yeah, so you can unload 3 or 4 UA into a target, and sometimes you won't see a Fatal Echoes. Sometimes you'll see one right there, just like I showed you. The last kind of mini trait, it's like a mini gold. I don't know exactly what you call this, but Compounding Horror. Every time your Agony and Corruption deals damage, you have a 10% chance to gain a stack of Compounding Horror. When you cast an Unstable Affliction, you consume all of these, and that UA deals instant damage on the cast. So this goes up to about 60k, crits for about 120 in my gear. So it's good. It's these two things end up being about 1 to 1.5% of your damage, again depending on your reap uptime. All this stuff is amplified by reap. Again, that kind of goes into the power of this affliction spec. So the last kind of bit of talents that you have are the ones that are useless and the ones that amplify. Oh, you also have this Sweet Souls. This is your do not ever buy a health pot again ability. Health pots heal for 475. It is a static amount. Health stones without this heal for about 300k. This allows them to also heal for an additional 25% of your maximum health. This also is affected by reap, and it becomes basically a free heal when you are when you're under reap. Like, it's a full heal. It's awesome. So good stuff. Everything else is stuff that either increases your healing or damage. Shadows of the Flesh increases the amount absorbed by Soul Leech by 3%. This is actually the amount of damage that you deal gets amplified into this. So if you deal 100 damage, the old Soul Leech, the old Soul Leech would heal you for, or you would get a 10 hit point shield. This would change it to a 13 hit point shield. That's about all it does. Long Dark Night of the Soul increases healing you receive from Drain Life by 30%. This makes Drain Life heal for a lot. I'll say that it's an average of 15% after this point without Reap, and about 20% with Reap. It's very noticeable, and that is per tick, which is not, it is under 1 second per tick. So it's really strong, really powerful. This is kind of your base thing. Increases shadow damage by 2%. This is amplified under Reap, I'm pretty sure, because everyone else gets a 4 or 5% bonus damage. Or 3%. It's some number, but this is amplified. Shadowy Incantations. This is typically your best or second best trait. Increases your damage by 3%. Again, Reap is 6%, and this is generally one of your better ones to get relics for. Obviously, I don't have any, but that's because RNG. Your second best trait is typically Perdition. This increases in power as your gear is higher and your crit is higher. Increases the critical strike damage dealt by your Agony, Corruption, Drain Life, and Unstable Affliction by 13%. So all of your damage except for Siphon Life. And this, again, is better as you get more crit. I think the point for where this becomes better is 10 or 15% crit. I'd have to run the numbers again, but again, really strong. Third best trait is going to be your Inimitable Agony. Inimitable Agony, something like that. Increases the damage dealt of Agony by 12%. Reap is 24. Fourth best is your Hideous Corruption. Increases damage dealt by Corruption by 12% base. I have it at 20% with 5 ranks. So again, Reap is going to put this up to 24 base. Mine is going to be up to 40. And Inherently Unstable is going to be your next best. Kind of when you're getting down to the less not really effective. Increases your critical strike. Increases the critical strike chance of Unstable Affliction by up to 6%. This is amplified to 12%, and this really scales off Perdition. Really helps with Perdition and stuff like that. The last damage trait, you really don't want to get these relics, is Drain to a Husk. Increases your damage dealt by Drain Life by 6%. Considering Drain Life typically doesn't have more than a 20% uptime, this is just not good. So, your last thing, I mean, is the same 5% damage boost that everyone else gets. This is not affected by Reap, so don't worry about that. It is just a passive 5%, so that's good stuff. And I think that's honestly everything for the just the general walkthrough here. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I'm going to be doing a couple of kind of playthroughs and just demonstrating some of the talent builds and stuff like that over the next couple days, hopefully. Let me know if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.